Zachy Hassan is your host on this most epic journey through pop culture's past. Hold on to your butts. This is Nostalgia Theater.
Brought to you by the Movie Film Podcast.
Where are we?
I got a feeling we're not in Brooklyn no more.
Luigi! Benji! You better not hurt us!
They're brothers. They're plumbers.
Oh no! Mario! Luigi!
They're on the trail of a kidnapped princess and a mystical meteorite
It's incredible!
that gives anyone who possesses it the power to rule the universe.
Get me the rock! Come and get it, lizard breath!
Now, they must rescue the princess
Luigi!
Alien species escaping.
and make it safely back
Later, alligator.
to our world
Are you alright?
before time runs out.
Shoot him! Look out, Mario!
Get him! Yes!
No, stop! Stop! No, not again!
Super Mario Brothers. This ain't no game.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Nostalgia Theater. This is Zachy, and that audio you just heard is the trailer for a truly bizarre film that has nonetheless taken up a place of adoration in the hearts of many. It is a movie that celebrated its 25th anniversary earlier this year, and it is unique in so many ways. It is Super Mario Brothers, the movie, and this is a movie that has been the subject of endless fascination, not only to me, but to many people online, including my guest. I'm joined for this episode by Ryan Haas, who is the founder and proprietor of the Super Mario Brothers the Movie Archive. And it is exactly as described online. It is the place to go to find out about the first video game movie adaptation. I think that's correct, right, Ryan?
That is correct.
I mean, it's momentous. It's amazing, and it is a film. My partner Brian Hall on my other show, I tell him about this movie, and he doesn't. He knows it exists, but he can't wrap his brain around it. And I say, Super Mario Brothers the movie is like if Christopher Nolan was handed the Super Mario Brothers franchise and was told to make a movie out of it. It's
I've said that many times to
have
people.
you really?
Yeah, it's actually been a blessing to have the Dark Knight trilogy, primarily because I can use that as an example. It's like, you know how Nolan just took the idea of Batman and made it his own thing and explained everything? Well, that's basically what they did for Super Mario Brothers.
It's like we can't just have them jump super high. We got to come up with like hydraulic lifts, and we got the only thing missing is Michael Caine just explaining all the thing in his Cockney accent. So this is exactly. So Super Mario Brothers the movie turned 25 earlier this year. It had the misfortune of opening like a few weeks before Jurassic Park, right?
I think 2 weeks before.
Which in scheduling terms was maybe not the smartest thing. But my question, more than anything else, before we dive into it, I mean, did this movie have a chance, even if the scheduling was not sort of, if it weren't about to get shorn in half by a T-Rex?
No, I think there was a lot going against the movie. Even before it came out, the movie had been through so many revisions, directors, scripts. They blew a lot of the budget on the development of the movie, trying to for a few years before trying to make a fantasy, more video game based version before going to the sci-fi, dystopian version that we know and some of us love. Yeah. So they spent a lot of the budget on that already. So it kind of was a very tumultuous project from its inception, really. And by the time it was done, by the time Disney got their hands on it and released it, they just kind of, it's very clear in retrospect that they just did not know how to market this thing or what to do with it, and even though it should be the easiest thing in the world, it's Super Mario Brothers. Everybody knows what it is. Like in 1993, that was the height of the what Mario fans like to call the Mario Mania era of the character, where more kids knew who Mario was than Mickey Mouse. So it should have been a slam dunk, but yeah, like just the development of the movie and the way the movie was made, I mean, it put them in a really weird position. It's clear they didn't know what to do with it.
Well, so that's my question. I think just to start things off, I mean, the iconography of Mario Brothers was well and truly established by 1993. I mean, this wasn't something that it wasn't a flash in the pan. Mario Brothers pre-Super, had been around since the 80s. There had been the cartoon show, there'd been the cereal, the T-shirts, you name it. So it wasn't a long walk to get to the Mario Brothers that everybody knows. So talk about why they went this way.
I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into why and how we got the movie we got, but I mean, I think you kind of led into it a little bit when you said a lot of the iconography was there for the franchise, but that's kind of all there is there, especially at the time. It's Mario is an icon. Mario is an avatar that the player puts their own experiences into, and not so much a story or something that easily lends itself to vast world building or a 3-act structure or even going from one form of media to another. And that's why it was so difficult trying to translate for the first time a video game into a motion picture, and in live action no less, and a game that doesn't really have a huge narrative backbone. So with that in mind, I mean, a lot of the reason that the movie turned out the way it did is because Nintendo gave the rights to Light Motive in Allied Filmmakers, which at the head would be Roland Joffe and Jake Eberts. Jake Eberts was a producer on movies like Chariots of Fire, and of course Roland Joffe is a pretty prolific director.
Sure.
Killing Fields, things like that. So, I mean, he was a serious filmmaker, and this was kind of one of his first explorations into producing a movie. He didn't really want to direct this, but he found it very captivating and intriguing to try to adapt this, turn it into something. And Nintendo at the time, and to this day, I mean, they have so much money. They have more money than they know what to do with, and they weren't really thinking about the machine of a big licensed product or whatever. I mean, they had done the cartoon. They had done the cartoons. There have been some comic books about the characters and stuff like that. But
by
in
Valiant,
terms of,
I think, right? This is like before before they were doing superheroes, they were doing Nintendo and wrestling, I think.
Exactly, yeah. So you had a Mario and Zelda and a Game Boy and a Nintendo comic system, comic books. So you had all that stuff. But I think Nintendo just kind of saw the film rights for Super Mario Brothers as kind of a whim, kind of a folly, kind of a experimentational thing. I mean, they kind of treated it as they would a video game project, in terms of a lot of times when Nintendo makes games, they don't say, like if you take Star Fox, for example, they don't say, oh, you know what, we're going to just make a new Star Fox game. Instead, they just develop video game prototypes that are based on gameplay, and they're like, okay, this game sounds kind of cool, that game sounds kind of cool, this gameplay is interesting, that gameplay is interesting. Oh, you know which character this fits? Star Fox. Let's make this the new Star Fox game. And if they don't have a existing franchise that fits onto that, then they'll make a new franchise. That's how we get games like Pikmin and things like that. So I think they kind of looked at it from that perspective, like, we trust the filmmakers, so we're going to let them kind of be the experts, and we're going to be hands off, and we're just going to see what it does, because we don't really care that much. I mean, so, and that was kind of the thing. And I think what happened was, they put the rights up. Nintendo put the rights up for film, and a lot of bigger named studios came at bat with bigger offers, but what Roland Joffe ended up doing was something that nobody else did, which was he traveled to Kyoto, to Japan himself. He tried to live the culture a little bit, and he visited like the president of Nintendo like personally, and gave him this pitch of what he wanted to do, and he was taking it very seriously and stuff like that. And but of course, his emerging new production company didn't have as much to offer for the rights for the film. But when he was negotiating it with the president of Nintendo, I guess that he just got to him in like a businessman respect kind of way, and he was asking him, why should I give you the rights? And Roland Joffe just said, well, because I'm here and they're not, and I care about this. And so that kind of stuff impressed the Nintendo people, and that's why they kind of gave the rights to them, is because they kind of went the extra mile to be like, no, we care about this property. We want to do something interesting with it. We don't just want to take it and do a cash in or a quick thing or a whatever. We want to delve into this and make it a real thing, so a serious thing. So that was the first step, is because Nintendo, it was like, okay, you guys, you film guys can just have this, and we'll be hands off.
Now, around when did Nintendo give Joffe the screen rights?
So this was quite early, I believe. This was probably around 1990-ish. Okay. So like 3 years before the movie came out or so. And so once they got the rights, the first thing they did, they tried to actually do some things. What I consider, they tried to do the same kind of approach that happened with Superman the movie. You remember, with Superman the movie, the first thing that they did was get a very prolific writer. They got Mario Puzo to write the screenplay,
right? So
they could attract higher named stars, like A-list stars, we can get Marlon Brando, we can get Gene Hackman and stuff like that, and then they fill it in that way. So their plan was to kind of do that with Mario Brothers, and the first person they got on the project was Barry Morrow to write the screenplay, who had, I believe, just won an Academy Award for Rain Man. And it's interesting. That's not the first person that I think you would think of writing a screenplay, but I think they were just going through it at this angle of, well, he's prolific and stuff like that. And so that's when you started to attract people like Dustin Hoffman, and people were talking about people like Danny DeVito for Mario and things like that. And but the screenplay itself was just a very strange existential road trip, kind of a really out there kind of script. And apparently, I've heard from some of the later writers that the script was so much in the vein of Drain Man that, I spoiled the thing. It was so much in the vein of Rain Man that they called it Drain Man.
Drain Man.
After Mario. So they kind of, that was version 0 of the story, and then they were like, okay, well, this kind of weird esoteric thing maybe is a little too out there. Let's actually try to make a fantasy movie that's a Labyrinth or a Legend or something like that, where we can just kind of, or Willow, and do a fantasy version and see how far we can get with that. And so they got Tom Parker and Jim Genowin to do a screenplay that was more video game focused, and and those are the screenwriters that went on to do things like Richie Rich and the Flintstones live action films, and they got Greg Beeman attached as director, and they worked on that version of the movie for quite a while. There were a few drafts of the screenplay. They had a lot of character concepts made and sets kind of mocked up. We've interviewed some people that worked on this version of the movie. They were doing some really clever things with forced perspective and things like that for the castles to make them seem like they were going on forever and things like that. And there were some really interesting makeup tests, and that's kind of where they kind of started to be interested in Arnold Schwarzenegger as King Koopa.
Wow.
And some of the concept art we have from that era actually has like King Koopa manipulations of concept art of what he would look like as King Koopa. So it's Schwarzenegger, but with all of this, theoretical, headdresses and prosthetics and things like that to make him seem like a cross between Conan the Barbarian and King Koopa, from the video games, like a big hulking, like dinosaur monster warrior king kind of guy. So you can kind of see the kind of route they were going, and you would have Goombas and Toad, and the Mushroom People would be like all these like animatronic puppet type things, and it would just be Mario in another world, like a Wizard of Oz kind of thing. And they got pretty far on that, and that's where they spent a lot of the money trying to make it work. And then Greg Beeman's movie, Mom and Dad Save the World, came out, and it kind of did really badly, like financially, and got like bad reviews and stuff. And then the producers got cold feet after that, and they were kind of took a step back and were like, well, maybe we should kind of rethink this whole thing. And so Greg Beeman was dismissed, and I believe they were trying their best to find another filmmaker who would like step on and just kind of run with this. But then that's kind of where it really took a turn, because they at that point they were searching for a new director, and then that's when they found not one director but two in Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, who are best known for the creation of Max Headroom. And so that's when they came in.
And that's, it's such an odd choice, because they didn't really have, the runway behind them. Except, possibly if you look at Max Headroom as a stylistic template, which I guess you can see sort of tendrils between the Max Headroom, the way that world is visualized in Super Mario Brothers. I suppose you could do that. But, certainly that's not... this gets back to what I was saying earlier. It's just the way that this world was visualized is so completely out in left field.
Yeah. So for them, what got them the job, was two things. First of all, their work on Max Headroom, did kind of win over the director, the producers. They that was kind of a big thing. They liked that. Morton and Jankel were pretty well known for their innovative use of computer technology in some of the commercials and things they had worked on, music videos they had worked on, and of course what they were doing in Max Headroom, which its a big shtick was using prosthetics and trickery to try to mimic what a character stuck inside of a computer would kind of look like.
Right.
And in fact, they co-wrote I believe one of the very first books on computer graphics. It's like, I can't remember. I think it's called Advanced Computer Graphics or something. I actually have it over here. It's a big hardback book, and it has all these examples of computer imagery. So they were kind of at the forefront of using technology in interesting ways, and I think the producers kind of saw that was could be an interesting mix with Super Mario Brothers because of the translation from video games to a film. And they had one theatrical feature a few years prior, which was DOA with Meg Ryan and
oh, okay, right,
yeah, and Dennis Quaid. Yeah, there you go. So that was one part of it, and the other part was they had this pitch. They, and very much we talked about Christopher Nolan like getting Batman Begins on this pitch that he made and this vision that he had. Well, Morton and Jankel had that too. They came in and they were like, well, we want to do this movie, but we don't want to do what you've got set up right now. We don't want to do this fantasy script. We don't want to do any of that. And they were like, well, what do you want to do? And they said, well, we have an idea. And they were the ones that had this whole concept, this angle of, why don't we tell the quote real story that happened that inspired the video game that was reinterpreted by Japanese video game developers later on.
Yeah.
And so they came up with the idea of like, well, dinosaurs are like a big thing right now, and Super Mario World had just come out, which had Yoshi and had Dinosaur World and stuff, and they were like, well, why don't we have this thing where we can explain why everything is the way it is, why the world is the way it is. We'll just have people, descended from dinosaurs, and that can give you all this imagery and all these reasons for why there's two worlds and things like that. And they worked backwards from the story that you can read in the instruction manual for Super Mario Brothers for the NES.
Right.
If you read that story, it basically is exactly the template for what happens in the movie. It's the only canon story that the series kind of had in the main games, and they took the one from Super Mario Brothers 1 and turned that into explain all this and make it real. So they came up with all that stuff, and the producers were like, okay, well let's do that, and they went there, but then that's when all this other stuff started to happen, even more screenwriters. They started with Terry Runte and Parker Bennett writing their initial screenplay, and they wrote a couple of drafts, and there were a lot of ideas and things like that, but it wasn't really congealing into a finished story, and then they brought on some more seasoned writers, Dick Clement and Ian LaFreniere, who I think did Across the Universe, and they were the ones that kind of took the story and that's where a lot of the darker aspects and the edginess kind of crept into the film. And that script is what attracted most of the talent, most of the actors that ended up going on the movie, like Fiona Shaw and like Bob Hoskins, and then Disney, bought the distribution rights for the film, and that's kind of another wrinkle where then they were very close. They were a couple weeks out from filming, and then Disney was like, well, this movie's too adult, it's skewed way too adult. We need to bring this back and make it more family friendly. So they brought Ed Solomon on, famous for Men in Black and Bill and Ted,
right? And
he did a 2-week quick rewrite to kind of bring it back to the more family friendly thing, and they would not, and at that point they would not let the directors have any input in what the script was being changed to, and they got the new script just days before they filmed, and the directors almost quit, and they decided, you know what, this is our thing and we're still going to make it our thing. So they stayed on with having already storyboarded the movie based on the old script and already having the locations and the sets and everything, but they got this brand new thing, and they still tried to make it work, and they didn't delay the production at all. And that's when they just took what they had, tried to shoot what they could, and then the original writers that they had, Runte and Bennett, came back to the set and helped them do daily rewrites every day until they could tame the movie and get it kind of done. And then
well, and I mean the cast is locked at this time, at this point.
Yes.
Bob Hoskins was not somebody who was particularly enamored of doing this movie. But by every interview I've ever read, it's kind of famous. He's is the worst mistake I ever made or whatever.
Yeah, I mean afterwards for sure, but during the production, everybody that I've talked to that worked with him on the movie said that he had a great time doing the movie.
Sure,
and that he loved working on the movie. He was super professional. Apart from a lot of the other of the actors were not extremely professional at all times. I've heard tons and tons of Dennis Hopper stories, but they said Bob Hoskins was nothing but a gem the entire time. Even though he might have went in the back and kind of screamed bloody murder at that point.
You gotta give him credit. He acts his ass off in this movie.
Oh yeah, and then that's the thing is the cast. The concept is already out there, but the cast can make or break the believability of like what's happening. And Bob Hoskins is super underrated for this kind of thing. I mean, you just look at what he did in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Sure.
I mean, he makes you believe that these cartoon characters are real, and that's him just acting with, you know, sticks and puppets and stuff, and the stuff comes in later, and he has to do the kind of same thing with Super Mario Brothers, and he just kind of really makes you believe that he's this regular average Joe plumber that gets thrown into this other world, and he just kind of grounds everybody around him.
Yeah, and I mean, really, you know, you brought up Roger Rabbit. I mean, he plays Mario as sort of a variation on that blue-collar Eddie Valiant type of character that he did really well there, you know, so...
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you know the movie sort of concocts this relationship with Luigi. First of all, when you make Luigi John Leguizamo, I mean, yeah, that's extremely off model. You know, you look at Bob Hoskins and you say, all right, well, he looks like Mario.
Yeah.
John Leguizamo,
and that's part of it.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's you can credit the directors for that. They were like, we don't want to like just make Luigi a carbon copy of Mario. They wanted to do something what they thought was interesting and progressive too. Like they don't have to be the same. You know, they don't have to be both like middle-aged white guys from Brooklyn. We'll make Mario like Bob Hoskins. And then they had seen John Leguizamo's show or something like that, and they were like, this guy's really funny and interesting, and I think that their chemistry between Bob Hoskins and this guy would be really interesting, and I think we can make it work. And not only that, I mean, the way they wrote the characters in the film, you know, were these kind of like, I don't believe in anything. What's real is real. And then you have Luigi that is like this dreamer and anything is possible kind of guy. And they kind of clash the whole time. And in addition to their age differences and philosophical differences. And so it is a really quirky pairing. But I think that they saw something in that, what they thought would be an interesting pair chemistry wise.
Well, the film is sort of, you'll have to refresh my memory on this, but doesn't it? It's their relationship. It's not their brothers. It's like their adopted brothers, or he's like his.
Well, they don't explicitly say it in the movie. There's a scene where Luigi just says, you know, tells Daisy that he's never really knew his parents, and Mario brought him up, but they are meant to be blood brothers, you know, same father, different mother. Okay. Separate, you know, many years apart. So they are brothers, but they don't really go into that backstory. You know, but they just lay the stage, the kind of groundwork of like Mario's kind of raised him from an early age, just because of the way that, and you can kind of see that in the beginning of the movie. It's like there used to be, I mean, early scripts said that the plumbing van used to say like Mario and Sons, and then it's ends up being crossed off and Sons has been replaced with like brothers. Okay. You know, so like the idea is that like, you know, the mom died in childbirth probably with Luigi, and then the dad passed away, you know, not that long after, and then it's Mario raising Luigi kind of thing.
That's interesting. I mean, just in terms of, and again, we can acknowledge that execution wise, it wasn't entirely successful, but I think that it does take a certain amount of gumption to be like, let's take this completely comical, fantastical world and just dive in and treat it as if it is history. You know, we're not going to wink. Yeah. We're not going to wink at it. And again, the critique, and I think it's an entirely valid critique, is like, well, this might be one of those properties that you do want to wink a little bit.
Right.
You know, but I think you could never make a movie like this today. You know? No,
absolutely. I mean, it just couldn't be done. I mean, it's the kind of dark and gritty reboot before that was like a thing, really.
Yeah, it's sort of it's like, again, you know, the Christopher Nolan thing. It's like the web short somebody would make. Like, oh, here's the serious version of this. You know, it's kind of funny because like we got Riverdale right now is very successful. Yeah. And that too is like one of these things where you're like, well, you're doing the Archie comics? Like this, you know, Archie's sleeping with Miss Grundy, like what, you know, and like, oh, it's a show, you know, but let's now the movie comes out, and obviously it died rather spectacularly. What was your in to this movie? Because obviously it took up enough of a place of residence in your head where you devoted considerable time to creating this web emporium of various arcana related to this movie, and that to me is equally fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, so I was born in 1987, so I was around when the movie came out, but I did not see it in the theater, and I wasn't a gamer. I wasn't a gamer until a few years after the movie even came out, and I actually kind of saw the movie like first
before you played the game.
Before I even played the games, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I just remember I'm going on a sleepover to a friend's house. The movie was on. Well, before that, I remember seeing like stand-ups at our local video rental store, like when the movie came out, on home video, which must have been like around November or December-ish of 1993. And I remember seeing these giant like cardboard stand-ups for it and wondering what it was. And I vividly remember my parents renting it and not letting me watch it because it was rated PG. Yeah, so I was like 5 or 6 probably. Yeah, 5 or 6. And then probably like 3, 4, or 5 years later is when I finally saw it, and it was on like TV. My dad was watching it, and I was like, and it wasn't even in the fantastical Dino Hatton world. It was in like it was still in Brooklyn, and I was like, what is this movie? And I was already intrigued with it because I think probably because of Bob Hoskins. So you
were how old when you saw the movie?
I was probably like 9 or 10.
Okay.
And it was just the beginning, and then I was going to a friend's house, and then I couldn't finish watching the movie at home, and so I went to my friend's house. I was telling him about it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we should rent it." And we went and rented the movie, and that night we watched it. That's the first time I saw it, and then saw the movie, and then shortly thereafter, I actually got into the games. I started playing the games, and then I just kind of went backwards from there.
That's amazing. That is just an amazing story.
Yeah, and then I just kind of went back and forth, trying to like figure out, well, why did this happen? How did this get made? What's this thing in the game? What is it in the movie, and why and things like that. And I was fascinated from the beginning about the connections. And I, as like I'm a huge Batman fan. I'm part of the Batman on Film podcast and website and all that. I was already a huge Batman fan by then, and so I was already used to this idea of like Batman's different between different forms, like in different forms of media. Like he's like this in the movie, he's like this in the comic books, he's like this in video games, and he's like this in the animation.
Yeah. So
I was already used to that kind of idea, like, especially like you look at the 60s show or the Burton movies or the animated series. So I kind of like, well, this is like that for Mario's, and I was always intrigued by it, and so it wasn't until and then there were things like the advent of eBay, and the very first thing I ever bought off eBay was the soundtrack from the movie, and then I just bought everything that I could find that was like memorabilia or whatever from the film, and then it wasn't until 2007 when I'm in college, and I just kind of got this hankering to, make a website. I'm like, the internet was obviously like huge, it was the internet then, right? But there wasn't really a place online to talk about the movie in a centralized location. It was like a little part of a Mario Brothers like game website or on the IMDb message boards or something, and it would always be like rated low and stuff like that. You didn't really have social media like we do today, so it was really hard to kind of find a place to talk about it and find a place that you felt was either giving it a fair shot or giving it like a common consensus. It was always kind of this like, oh, that movie was terrible. Oh, nobody liked that thing. That was so weird. But I just kind of felt like in the back of my head, like there's more people that either just liked it or appreciated it or think about it differently than that. And I kind of want to make a place where people can kind of experience that and kind of work that out, because I knew, by that point that, I knew a lot of the backstory by then. And I just knew that there was a lot of work and effort that got put into the film that that needed to be explained and needed to be out there for people to kind of see that and appreciate on a deeper level, like I did. And so that's why I did the website. And of course, I was kind of inspired by Batman on Film just because there's this website there for people to do that with Batman. You know, it's a centralized location. So I was like, I'm going to do that for Mario Brothers, the movie. So it kind of spawned from that, and it started with me just kind of putting all of my, memorabilia and stuff up on this website, and I made a, message board and things like that. And that's kind of how the Super Mario Brothers movie archive was born. And it's just grown like crazy ever since. Just a year or two after I started the website is when I had my first interview with Mark McCoy, who was part of the special effects crew and worked on the fungus, and that's when he told me all these stories and gave me all these like set photos and things like that. And it just opened my mind to like, there's this big world of people that worked on this thing that are like either proud of it or want to talk about it or know that it's this like interesting, quirky thing and are eager to kind of just re-explore it and reanalyze it and stuff like that, especially with somebody like me who appreciates the work and wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then every time, and getting new stuff, like new set photos, new things like, and a lot of times, you see a movie or get a movie on Blu-ray or DVD or whatever, and there's special features. There's, script notes. There's a commentary. But, there wasn't any of that for Super Mario Brothers. I mean, the original DVD was just awful and bare bones as it could be. So that was my mission too. I mean, the DVD was also like a really poor transfer. And since the movie is like this super detailed thing, especially with all the nuance in the production design and set design, like I really wanted like a better version of this thing. So from there, I just kind of started getting more and more interviews with people that worked on the movie and were involved in the movie. My partner that helps me run the website, Stephen Applebaum, he came in and the first thing he did was he got me an interview with Mojo Nixon, who played Toad, and
wow.
And it kind of went from there. I mean, interviewing actors and production designers and the writers and everybody I could talk to, we talked to. And we have interviews and set photos and production art, and we still get that stuff from people. And that's what's really cool about it, is because it just kind of started to form this network of goodwill, basically, across all these people that worked on the film. Because I could be like, do you know anybody else that worked on the movie? And or if I talk to somebody, they would be like, oh yeah, I heard about you guys from so-and-so. And it's like, you guys are great, and things like that. And it just kind of grew that way. And then, so that's kind of how the website kind of organically grew into this like giant, celebration of the film.
I mean, well, if nothing else, that's what the internet allows for, right? It's funny because you spend enough time on film Twitter, and you know this better than most. I mean, it really is just people wiping their asses on other people's tastes.
Yeah,
like, I like this thing, well, I'm gonna just shit on it. And it's like, there should be room for something like, here's this movie that not a lot of people like, but here's something really neat about it, or look at this. I love on the site you have pictures of the merch that was put out to tie in, and you got these Mario Brothers movie action figures, which I remember very distinctly seeing the commercials for those. I was in 8th grade at the time, so it's burned into my memory, being up eating my cereal, and during weekday morning cartoons, here's the Mario Brothers movie merchandise.
Hey kids, I'm here to tell you about two extremely famous plumbers, Mario and Luigi Mario, from the Super Mario Bros. Movie. You wanna know what makes them super? Cause they triumph over the evil Koopa and his brainless sidekicks, Iggy and Spike. Using only their plumbing tools, and they battle the Goombas. Koopa's hideous dino-human army. Those Goombas are scary. The Super Mario Bros. Action figures from Ertl. But don't worry, they're not real.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that these toys exist as this. It's just this fascinating piece of flotsam from
Yeah.
that you have to explain to somebody. You know what I mean? That to
Oh,
me is
yeah.
it's like, what is this? Wow, well, there was a Mario Brothers movie, really, and and it's like a conversation piece,
Yeah, and it gets even, Mario and Luigi is like, oh sure, but you're like, oh, but there's an Iggy and a Spike action figure. Oh, and there's a Crash action police car that breaks apart and it has fungus strands with suction cups. Oh, and there's a de-evolution chamber playset as well. And then it's this giant rabbit hole of like, what is this and how does that fit into the games and stuff like that.
So
that's the kind of stuff that fascinates.
The toys that are pictured on the site are part of your personal collection?
I think a lot of the ones on there were taken by some people we had on the forums that just wanted to contribute to the site and set them up and take nice pictures of them. Some of the pictures might be mine. I'd have to look and see, like some of the boxes and stuff of some of the other things.
But do you own these?
But I own them all. Yeah,
you
I
own
have
them all.
everything.
I mean, that's interesting too because they're from Ertl.
Yes,
which is
they don't typically do.
Right.
The action figures like that. They're more known for like the die-cast, farm toys and things like that. And they also did, some Batman things.
I was about to say, I remember
stuff.
very distinctly in '89 because I got the die-cast Batmobile, the greatest Batmobile.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, but also I remember like these little Micro Machine versions of the Batmobile, Joker van, and the Batwing.
Yep.
It's interesting because I got a couple years on you, so my on ramp into Mario Brothers was really like reading comic books in the early part of the '80s, and there were ads for the Atari game.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was just Mario Brothers. And,
right.
And it was, it was only with the Nintendo that obviously Super became like you have to have that as part of the title. But the serial that I mentioned earlier, but also the cartoon and Captain Lou Albano and
exactly.
That was and it's funny because I my boys watch that show now because it's on Netflix. But
it's on Netflix.
And it's very interesting how just a couple of years worth of difference allows for such a different way of plugging into this film, and I think it says something about
yeah.
I mean, I think that's the beauty of it. I think you summed it up so well. It's like, this is one interpretation and it doesn't have to be the interpretation, but it's kind of nice that something so out there can exist.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things where I'm fascinated with it because it really wasn't this throwaway cash-in thing. It was made by filmmakers who really had an angle on the material, and something that we say today is like, well, for the like superhero movies and things like that, we're like, well, the studios just need to get out of the filmmaker's way. They need to let the filmmaker make the film they want to make. Well, that's what happened with Super Mario Brothers. Basically, they were hands off. They said, turn this game into a movie, go. And they pretty much did it. They got cold feet towards production, but it still kind of turned out pretty close to the vision. So it's interesting to see, to say the least, especially because when it's the first video game movie, it kind of sets this strange precedent for movies to follow.
So we get Mario Brothers in '93. We get Street Fighter later that year, if I'm not mistaken, or was it '94?
I believe it's '94.
Street Fighter was '94, and then Mortal Kombat was '95.
Yeah. Yep.
So I mean,
and there's Double Dragon in there somewhere too.
Yes, that's right. With Robert Patrick was in that.
Yeah.
What a weird I totally forgot about Double Dragon. But it's interesting because of those four, really Mortal Kombat's the only one that performed.
Yeah, it got a sequel.
Yeah, and then that one died.
TV
a TV show. I forgot about that. I haven't revisited either the show or the sequel, but I remember I haven't revisited the first movie in a while either. I just watched Street Fighter a couple weeks ago with my kids, and
I love Street Fighter. It's such a guilty pleasure to me.
You need to do the Street Fighter archive because that's just as much of this kind of crazy thing that I don't think could exist today.
Yeah. It's true, and the Street Fighter Blu-ray is great.
Oh, is it? Is there a making?
There's tons of special features and stuff, and and we did get the Blu-ray for Mario Brothers released eventually. Through on Region B, of course, because Disney still controls the rights for Region A, and they're pretty sticklery about releasing stuff. But we worked with the archive. We worked with the Second Sight Entertainment to produce all the special features as well as a brand new documentary for the Blu-ray release that they did a couple of years ago.
That's amazing.
And and so they so there's brand new documentary, lots of interview footage with a lot of people that worked on the film, telling you a lot of the stories that the history that I've been telling you about on this podcast, and they were able to take a lot of the images and things from the site and kind of put them on the disc as picture galleries and stuff like that. So it's a really good companion. A lot of the stuff from the archive is just kind of in this disc, and there's even a steelbook version of it that got released a couple years later. So that's kind of a good mission accomplished, really, for the site, because that's something we always wanted. And of course,
that's amazing.
Blu-ray quality. It was finally that really opened the door, because then we were able to actually really see the film, and not only at a better resolution, but we didn't realize how bad the DVD was. The color timing is so much better and things like that. And we knew, and we knew how bad off it was before the Blu-ray, because for the 20th anniversary, or actually for the 19th anniversary, that was when me and Steven Applebaum, we hosted our first screening of the film at the Nuart in LA, and we screened a 35 millimeter print, and we were kind of blown away at how good the film looked. And since we were so ingrained with what the DVD looked like in the VHS, we're like, oh my gosh, the colors are all different, and it looks different. And a lot of the sound was better and things like that. So then that made us push harder to figure out how to get the Blu-ray out. And of course, when the Blu-ray's out, it just looks so much better. So,
well, I mean, it's amazing that you get to have this tangible piece of the legacy of this movie. It's you got to carry your love of it forward. 10 years later, 11 years later, and you were able to do something really substantial with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, when we talk about legacy, I mean, what is the legacy of this movie? Because I think it's worth saying. It's like I say all the time. I don't know if I'd say it's good, but it's fascinating, and isn't that just as interesting sometimes?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Adaptations are always fascinating, and then this one is high on my list, of course. And it did kind of do a lot of firsts. I mean, and some of them aren't as obvious when you look at it, but at a base level, it was made at this time, really interesting time, where it's this really interesting cross section between computer graphics and puppetry and physical effects and stuff like that. And there's a lot of that stuff in the film, right, with the Goombas and Yoshi, the animatronics, and in addition to all the the computer stuff. And as far as the computer stuff goes, this was the first film that got to use Flame, which for compositing, which is kind of
right
when it was still in its beta code, when the movie was being produced. So that was kind of a big thing at the time. And film industry wise, it was also the very first movie to use a digital intermediate, which is the thing to do. That's the commonplace. That's the process now. But Super Mario Brothers has the distinction of being the first film to go through a digital intermediate process with being with the film being scanned and stuff like that. And Chris Woods, the film's visual effects supervisor, pushed for that kind of process. And
so digital intermediate, for those people who are listening who might not understand, it's where you scan the film and then you make alterations digitally as opposed to
cutting the film.
Right, exactly. Wow. So this is the first. I myself didn't realize that was.
It's kind of it's not a very well known piece of trivia about the film. And I mean, that's something that, I've been meaning to, I have in the back of my head, there's a whole article I want to write about all that, put it out there. But, and really, I mean, the film was kind of shortlisted for a visual effects Oscar because of all this stuff. But Disney they promoted it a little bit, but they ended up pushing, but they didn't, because of the reception of the film, they didn't think that they would really get a nomination. So they pushed, and they put all their effort into A Nightmare Before Christmas instead.
Sure.
So, and of course, that's that one gets the nomination. So, but it was on the short list, and so
that's not nothing.
So
well, let's. I mean, the movie it tanked obviously, and I look at the budget partially, and I'm like, well, $50 million or thereabouts seems like probably a little bit high given what it was. But then again, it was quite ambitious. Why do you think it tanked? I mean, it's not like Super Mario Brothers was some cult phenomenon. I mean, it was, like we said, it was ubiquitous. So what happened when it came to the movie?
I think the marketing. I mean, they kind of marketed it to kind of bury it. I mean, they didn't know how to market it. They didn't really have much of a game tie-in with it. And I mean, it's even like, if you even look at the promotion guide, like on the website, we have the promotion guide, and that would get sent out to theaters, and it would even say like explicitly, like, you can only market this thing with things from the movie. Like, you're not allowed to mention or show like video game graphics or anything from the games. You can't reference the games at all.
Wow.
So there were weird stipulations like that where it was like, this has to stand in its own, and you can't even make that association. So it was kind of a weird thing that they were up against in marketing the thing, and it went through Hollywood Pictures instead of like traditional like Disney.
Yeah.
And I think that had kind of a something to do with it as well, and of course the placement just a couple weeks before Jurassic Park, I think kind of tanked it.
That to me more than anything, and you can sort of say, well, nobody could have predicted Jurassic Park was going to be the hit that it was, and it's like, well, no, everybody. Like you knew 3 years out, Jurassic. When the book came out, you're like, well, this is going to be the biggest movie of all time.
Yeah.
It's what's interesting hearing you describe your relationship with Super Mario Brothers the movie. It's very evocative to me of how I feel about Masters of the Universe the movie.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the first person I've heard say that, because I know that movie has had its own very interesting backstory and history and
and
following, and
Gary Goddard, who directed that, very similar to Morton and Jankel, kind of coming in out of the blue with an idea,
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of parallels there for sure.
And I was roughly the same age you were when you watched Super Mario Brothers as I was, so there's that part of it too. But it's interesting, you talk about just being able to just take things at face value. Oh, well, this is different. I mean, that was me when I watched Masters of the Universe. I wasn't like, oh, well, where's Battle Cat and where's Orko? I was just like, oh, well, this is the movie, and it's weird. We're very spoiled now in the comic book age, because nowadays, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I look at like Infinity War, and I'm like, well, this is just. I mean, when I was a kid, we had Lou Ferrigno. And we were like, that's what the Hulk is. Like, that's the best you'll ever get, and not to dog on.
Well, that's kind of the approach I took for the Mario movie. I'm like, well, this is the only Mario movie we're ever going to get. Exactly. I'm gonna explore the hell out of it until I'm blue in the face, because I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna figure out why it's so intriguing, down to the point of like pausing. Even on the VHS when I was a kid, I would pause the city sections and be like, okay, well, what does this street sign say? What can I make out here? Is that something from the games, And a lot of times it would be. And, the more we get, the Blu-ray and stuff like that, we get more and more answers and more things that just come out that shows like how I'm not going to say faithful, but how reverent they were to the games in terms of really trying to like fit them into the narrative that they had and the world building that they had created for it, And I would, on the website, one of my favorite examples is I talked to David L. Snyder, who was the production designer on Super Mario Brothers, who was also the art director for Blade Runner, which of course now you can see the obvious parallels between the city, from both films. I asked him, like, did you guys look at characters from the games and just kind of or items and objects and characters from the games and just kind of turn those into the signs on the street? And he said, no, we took all the stuff from the games, and then we figured out what they were in the world of the movie, and then we made the signs and stuff.
Interesting.
So they didn't just throw things. They figured out what it would be in the world. And so roto discs, are just kind of a hazard enemy kind of thing in Bowser's Castle in Mario Brothers 3, Super Mario Brothers 3, and they took this like little energy disc, and I asked him, asked David L. Snyder, well, there's a sign for Rotodisc in the city. What is that in the world of the movie? And he's, years and years later, he still remembered exactly what it was. He's like, oh yeah, the Rotodisc. That's the engines in the cars. They really put thought into all that stuff.
So this was, despite sort of the reputation that's accrued as this being, one of those legendary bad movies, there was a lot of thought and care put into the craft and sort of respecting the world that it sprang from.
Yep, exactly.
That is just such an interesting deep dive into this world. Now, I had heard that there's a new Mario Brothers movie coming.
Yes,
I'm assuming it'll be nothing like the previous one.
No, it's through Illumination.
Okay. So it'll be CG.
It'll be CG, and it's the same studio that does that's just did the Grinch and Minions and Despicable Me and stuff like that.
Okay, so we can sort of picture in our mind what that's probably going to look like.
Yeah, and they're working, really, and they're doing the opposite. They're like, oh, we're working closely with Nintendo, and we're having Shigeru Miyamoto. We're working like directly with them, so like it's beholden to the so it's more faithful to the games and stuff like that. So.
Sure, well, and understandable given the response that the initial movie received. That Nintendo will probably never let something like that ever happen again.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I said like Nintendo was like, oh yeah, whatever about the movie before when they sold the rights and before the movie came out, and after the movie came out, they're like, oh okay, let's not do that ever again.
Do that again. So Super Mario Brothers wasn't so much released as it was as it escaped.
Yeah. I've even heard these crazy, like, I'd have to see. There's a book or something somewhere where people have had some stories about like Nintendo themselves getting really cold feet before the movie came out, and we're trying to figure out like, can we cancel this movie? Can we like make it not come out? And so that might be where some of the things came in the marketing, like you're not allowed to use video game stuff with this and stuff. So I think like Nintendo even knew like before the movie came out, they were trying to like distance themselves from it.
They were trying to dodge the onrushing train.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, you can't say you blame him necessarily, given the way the box office fortunes panned out. But I appreciate that we were able to spend the last hour really diving deep into something that I'm fairly certain people listening to the show have not spent very much time thinking about. But I think that's the fascination, and I think that's the allure of nostalgia theater. That's exactly a movie like this really is held aloft by the nostalgia that people have for it, and I appreciate that you were able to take your nostalgia and transmute it from something that sort of exists in your mind into something that other fans of the film are able to benefit from, which I think is so amazing and extraordinary.
Oh yeah, well, thank you. I mean, that was the goal, and I'm so glad that 11 years later, there's been such a great community that's come out of it, and relationships we've had with fans and people that have worked on the film and getting things like a Blu-ray release and things like that. And it's just been nothing but, it's interesting because a lot of fandom is really, it's hard to be a fan of things sometimes. And what's funny is that this movie has always had this kind of like scrappy underdog, everybody hates it kind of thing. But the people that love it. And we've just kind of stuck in that zone, and we've been used to the criticism, and so it's been just nothing but fun exploring it, since 2007, and it's paid off very well. So.
Well, and for those of you who haven't seen the film, now you said that the DVD the Blu-ray is not available in Region 1.
It's not available in Region 1. There you can get it Region 2, and there's also there's a Japanese release, and I've heard that it is Region 1 compatible, but I can't confirm that. I actually have a copy, but I haven't tested it myself. But I've heard it is Region 1.
And I know for a while, I mean, the whole damn thing was on YouTube, like just uninterrupted.
It was, but we've kind of been working to take it down as needed, because it's it is kind of copywritten, and we want to support the Second Sight and people like that have put all the work into getting it in HD and everything. So
absolutely,
it's a little harder to find it on YouTube, and when it does come up, it's probably going to come down.
and the film, like I said, stars Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo, Dennis Hopper, Samantha Mathis, Fisher Stevens. I mean, it's Gianni Russo from The Godfather, Lance Henriksen. I mean,
Lance Henriksen in a very interesting cameo. Yeah,
cameo. It's crazy. It is a source of endless fascination for me. So certainly, I hope people who listen to this conversation will be moved to check out your website, and it is Super Mario Brothers the movie archive, and it is smbmovie.com.
Yes.
And it's one of those great sites. It's a great site for, like, if you're at work and you're like shouldn't be doing anything, you shouldn't be on social media, but like you're looking for something to do. It's like a great site to just click through. So many pictures. So it's
a rabbit hole.
It really is, and that's like the perfect word for it. I had an absolute blast going through it, and I hope people listening will too. As we wrap up this conversation, first of all, Ryan, thanks so much for coming on.
Yep.
People who listen to the Batman on Film podcast would know that I've appeared on that show a few times with you. But for people listening to this show who might not know about your work there, please do fill the audience in on that.
Yes, one of my other passions is, of course, Batman and DC Universe. So to that end, I am part of the Batman on Film podcast, and you can find that over on Batman-on-film.com, or there's a few Twitter accounts. My main Twitter account is at SMB_Ryan, and there's also a whole Twitter account that I run that's part of Batman on Film's Batman Podcast Network, and that's at BatPod Network, and I always post the latest BOF podcast on that too.
Perfect. Well, I hope people will follow you on there. And as for me, folks, if you're looking to find more from me, you can always go to my website, ZackysCorner.com. That's ZAKIS Corner. That's also my Twitter. That's also my Instagram. So please feel free to hit follow there. You can also go to our Facebook page, Facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and send me any of your feedback there. Also, you can email us, moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com, and please go to iTunes and leave a review, both for the regular movie film show and also for this, the Nostalgia Theater show. Let us know what you think, leave a star rating, and also let me know what topic areas you would like to see covered in future episodes. I would love to hear from you. This is a Nostalgia Theater as we wind down 2018. It's been a fun and very diverse year of topics, but we got lots of fun stuff planned for the remainder of this year, plus next year too, so please feel free to come back next time. Thanks everybody for listening.